Hi, friends. In our current series, we're looking at how to use Scripture in prayer. Today, I want to consider the idea of taking a story from Scripture and using that in our prayers. We've talked about praying the prayers of Scripture. We've talked about taking a command, a teaching, a promise from Scripture, and use those in our prayer. But what about a story? Actually, when we were looking at taking prayers from Scripture, we used the idea of taking a story. If you remember back to the video where we talked about praying along with the early disciples in Acts chapter 4. Check that video out if you don't recall that one. But today, I want to look at a story out of Mark 9 that I think gives us two ways to use this story as fuel and some of the words for our own prayer, as well as some understanding and teaching, all out of this story. A lot of learning to use Scripture in prayer, to be honest, is about immersing ourselves in Scripture to a degree. Not so much that you could quote great passages, but enough so that you're familiar with the story, so that if it pops into your brain, you would know how to use it. So in today's story, Jesus has taken Peter, James, and John, and they've gone up to a high mountain to pray. And while they're there, Jesus is transfigured before them. It's phenomenal. The disciples don't know what to do. Moses and Elijah appear. But while they're on top of the mountain, the rest of the disciples are down in town, just kind of hanging out. Now, they've been with Jesus enough that they know how to minister. They can trust themselves to ministry. Well, while they're down in town, some people recognize them and start bringing needs to them, and they start doing kingdom work. Well, a father brings his son to the disciples, and his son has been troubled with a demon, particularly nasty situation. And the disciples, I'm sure they took turns, maybe they worked together, but they could do nothing to free this poor boy from the demon. And while they're getting completely exasperated, trying to do what they can't do, using every word Jesus ever gave them, the father is just at wit's end trying to decide what to do himself because the disciples of Jesus can't help the boy. And then the Pharisees are there chastising and making fun of the disciples. And while all this is going on, the crowd is getting bigger. And into this scene walks Jesus and Peter, James, and John. Now picture the faces of Peter, James, and John. You're like, what is going on here? And Jesus just walks up to the situation and basically asks what's going on. And the father walks up and says, I brought my boy to your disciples. He's got a demon. It throws him into the fire. It throws him down. It's trying to kill him. And your disciples can't do anything to help. And Jesus asks some more questions about the situation. And while this is happening, the demon casts the boy onto the ground. So the father, in sheer desperation, says, please, if you can do anything, help me. And Jesus turns to the dad and says, if I can do anything, everything is possible for God, for him who believes. And the father's like, oh, I believe, but help my unbelief. And then Jesus, seeing that the crowd's getting bigger, he just frees the boy and gives him back to his dad and everybody goes away, and the disciples are like, they're beside themselves, bewildered. Then we get a little later, and Jesus and the disciples are talking, and the disciples say, Master, why couldn't we do anything? We've been successful before in the task you sent us for, but we couldn't help that boy. What was wrong? And Jesus said, this time only comes out by prayer. Now, in the context and scenario, Jesus didn't mean y'all should have knelt down right there and then and prayed. I'm sure that's a component, but what Jesus meant was, you haven't spent enough time in your background, in your history, in your life, praying to be prepared for that moment of ministry. You need more prayer foundation in order to enable you to do this. Now, there are two ways I think we can pray from this story. So the first way is we can put ourselves in the father's situation, not because of trouble with our child of any reason, but in that whole concept of, Lord, I have faith, but I don't have enough faith. Grow me up, grow my faith. And then as I'm saying that, that passage where Jesus talks about if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, that's enough. And so I might combine those two in the prayer. And then, secondly, I want to incorporate as part of the example to a request like with the disciples. Lord, kind of inspire us and help us to spend more time with you in prayer so that the foundation of our life can be more stable and we will be more prepared for ministry. And so I might pray something like, Lord, I get the Father's exasperation. I know I don't have enough faith. I need more faith. Lord, help me in my unbelief, my lack of faith. Grow my faith, please, Lord. And yet I also cling to that promise you've given me that even if I have faith as small as a mustard seed, that you respond joyfully to that faith. And so, Lord, I accept the faith I have. I come to you in the faith I have, and I ask for more faith. I ask to be able to see what you're doing and to trust you that you want to do it, and you can do it. So help me there, Lord. And then, Lord, okay, I get that my ministry would grow if I spent more time in private prayer, if I spent more time with you. And so, Lord, this is your ministry. It's not mine. You're the one leading. So, Lord, deepen my faith, deepen my ability to serve you. Inspire me and enable me and prompt me to spend more time with you, because I want my ministry to be better. I want to be able to see and hear what you're doing. I want to be able to respond to you in the moment. And so, Lord, help me to pray more and to spend more time just listening to you and sitting with you in prayer. You can, any of those two, either of those two, both of those facets out of this story, you could take those. They are amazing. They are powerful. They're important for us to use. This is an example of how you could take a story from Scripture and use it in your prayers. I hope that example is helpful to you. As you're reading Scripture, as Scripture stories pop into your brain, use them. It's a powerful way of incorporating Scripture into our prayers. Little story from Mark 9, fueling our prayers today. Until next time, this is God's Shade. Blessings, my friends.